Morning sickness, breastfeeding, the baby blues, moms, we know what this is all about. This morning, author Alena Dillon joins us to talk about her book, My Body is a Big Fat Temple, an ordinary story of pregnancy and early motherhood. Alena, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a thrill to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Alena, I have two children. My baby is 8 months old, and creating life is not easy. Tell us about your book and what made you want to share your story.
I decided to write this book as I was going through pregnancy and that entire experience because it occurred to me that we only kind of share part of the story, the buffed up, romanticized version of motherhood. And it's a disservice to new mothers because when they come across experiences that aren't so romantic, that can be scary and uncomfortable and despairing and fearful and anxious, they feel alone. They haven't expected it. I mean, we call it expecting, and yet we don't actually prepare mothers for what's to come. And that can be a scary experience because then you feel alone and isolated and maybe like you're doing it wrong. So I'm trying to kind of begin this conversation and share so that there's more transparency and more honesty about what the entire multifaceted experience is like.
There is so much that goes into this, Alena, from getting pregnant, being pregnant, how you feel, the things you're expected to do. I think one of the things that I notice that people don't talk about is the expectations are still there for you to show up to work every day, to, continue living like nothing is going on. But if you're like me who had hyperemesis and you're nauseous and throwing up all the time, it's like,
it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's a terrible condition that and I don't know how women with hyperemesis do it because I just had like debilitating nausea the entire time. But it seems like they really don't treat you unless your life or the baby's life is in danger. It doesn't seem like there's a real value on just like the quality of life. And I'm hoping that begins to shift and there should be more research and funding that goes towards just like finding out why this is happening to a woman's body and what we could do in a safe way to make it a more pleasant and loving experience. Because for women, and I think it's like 50% of women experience nausea, and yet we just expect them to endure it, and it's a real shame.
So you have one baby, your boy is 2 years old, right? And you suffered from baby blues, you questioned your connection to your son. What do you think was so important to share about this?
I think how common it really is, and yet it's not discussed. So I had a hard time bonding with my baby. It went, now I'm completely bonded, and it was just something that I struggled with at the beginning. But while I was going through it, I didn't realize how common it is. I mean, the baby blues in particular happen to like 80% of women, and that's just like this kind of temporary depression that happens right after childbirth. And they don't really tell you to expect it. It's probably going to happen to you. So I felt kind of blindsided by it. And then the more that I talked to other women about the difficulty bonding, the more as soon as I said something, the defense walls kind of dropped and the shame dropped. And they were like, oh, that happened to me too. And there's community there. And that's really comforting to know that it's only a temporary thing and you're not alone.
Totally. That is so important to talk to other moms. That's what I learned through my process twice. What were you most surprised going through the process as far as like pregnancy is concerned?
I mean, the degree of morning sickness was probably the most surprising, and how it's constant and doesn't let up, and how it kind of changes your worldview when you're feeling that chronically ill. I mean, pregnancy is kind of like a chronic condition, and people don't really refer to it as that way. It's more like a blessing and congratulations, and we don't really talk about the hardships. We focus more on the joy rather than the pain. And there's certainly tons of joy, and having a baby is so worthwhile. But I think it'd be fair if we have this more well-rounded, kind of presentation of the experience.
I agree. I noticed that there's a little love from Amy Schumer on your book cover. She's been open about hyperemesis in her docuseries. Is there a project in the works together, maybe?
So she optioned my debut novel, Mercy House. So that's how we made a connection. And then when I saw her being so open about her experience and trying to shine light on women's issues in general, I reached out about this project as well and asked if she would read it. And she was generous enough to offer an endorsement. She's been so supportive of my career in general. And my debut novel, Mercy House, that option is still in development. So that's in the works.
Yeah, her docuseries was eye-opening too for many people in general. So this is interesting. So if we buy your book today or tomorrow, you're donating proceeds. Tell us about that.
Sure, yes. So if you buy tomorrow or today, we are donating 10% of the profits to Every Mother Counts, which is a nonprofit that works to make pregnancy and childbirth safe and equitable for all mothers everywhere. The most maternal deaths can be prevented if the proper care and respect is provided. So that's what the nonprofit aims to do. And it's a really worthwhile cause, and we're happy to support it.
And you have an event at Warwick's tomorrow. How can people tune in?
Yeah, so at 4 o'clock Pacific at Warwick's through their Facebook page, I'll be joined by Newman, who is a writer that I deeply admire, who also writes about motherhood, and she's funny and gracious, and so she wrote Waiting for Birdie and Catastrophic Happiness. So she and I will be discussing our books and motherhood in general for about an hour, starting at 4 p.m. on Warwick's Facebook Live page.
Okay, awesome. Alena, thank you so much for sharing your story and for speaking to us this morning. I think it's an important conversation to have.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it was great chatting with you.
Take care.